Welcome back. In your world news, U.S. President Barack Obama has made a historic visit to the Hiroshima World War II Memorial. Obama, along with Japan's Prime Minister, laid a wreath at the site of the world's first atomic bombing, a symbolic gesture from both who aim to highlight the importance of a global reduction in nuclear weapons. Here's more in this report.
It's a journey that President Obama had reportedly wanted to make for years. Now, within months of leaving office, the 44th President of the United States came to the town which the 33rd President, Harry Truman, had ordered destroyed almost unimaginably with a single bomb. His tone was stark and somber, conscious, it seemed, of the weight of this moment, of his own presidential legacy.
But we have a shared responsibility to look directly into the eye of history and ask what we must do differently to curb such suffering again.
There is a symmetry at play here. In the first few months of his presidency in 2009, President Obama made a speech in Prague in which he called for an end to nuclear weapons in the long term in the world. He's chosen the last few months of his presidency to make this symbolic trip to Hiroshima to call for the same thing. A message echoed by Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who urged the world to ensure no repeat of Hiroshima or Nagasaki could ever happen. Earlier, they'd met survivors, visited the museum dedicated to the horrors they'd suffered. President Obama tried to put them in the framework of what he called humanity's core contradiction between progress and a base instinct for conflict.
The scientific revolution that led to the splitting of an atom requires a moral revolution as well.
The president made no apology, but his focus on morality was a political risk. Many historians, many Americans believe the bombing was morally justified, ending the war early, saving more lives than it claimed. Emiko Okada's 12-year-old sister was one of those who died. Emiko was 8. She remembers the flash, the heat, the gruesome deaths.
In Prague, Obama used the words moral responsibility. I thought then he understands. I wanted him to make a speech after feeling the atmosphere of Hiroshima, to say we need a world without nuclear weapons.
That he did, but some point out he came with the launch code to a nuclear arsenal that's being renewed, not dismantled.
Obama's policy of modernization, which is pledging $1 trillion of spending over 30 years in the United States to modernize the nuclear arsenal and its delivery systems, runs exactly counter to a desire for a world without nuclear weapons.
Australia's government has intervened to get all references to the country removed from a UN report on climate change. They argue that negative commentary about World Heritage sites like the Great Barrier Reef would damage tourism. Al Jazeera's Andrew Thomas reports from Sydney.
Scientists have been clear for years. 2 of Australia's World Heritage sites are in danger. Climate change is damaging Australia's Great Barrier Reef, causing coral bleaching like this. And ancient forests like this one in Tasmania are at risk too, from fires, which rising temperatures make more likely. But neither Australia's reef nor its forests are mentioned in a new United Nations report looking at risks climate change poses to World Heritage sites. In fact, there's no mention of Australia at all. That's because Australia's government objected to an early draft of the report which did include them. Reference to, in particular, the Great Barrier Reef in a report provisionally titled Destinations at Risk could have a negative impact on tourism, the government said.
It's a jaw-dropping revelation. It really was quite shocking because the government should be promoting science and promoting information about the health of World Heritage treasures like the reef instead of trying to censor it in this way.
Al Jazeera has seen the chapter on the Great Barrier Reef, which was dropped from the UNESCO report. Climate change, it says, is the primary long-term threat to the world's most extensive coral reef ecosystem. There's international concern, it says, that the reef's extraordinary biodiversity and natural beauty may lose its World Heritage values. Australia's government says the report risks confusing people into thinking the Great Barrier Reef might be dropped as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Australian politicians have lobbied hard and so far successfully against UNESCO putting the reef on its list of sites formerly in danger of losing their prestigious World Heritage status.
Of course, there is an irony here. The revelation that Australia's government has effectively airbrushed concern about its World Heritage sites from a report about climate change means those sites and the dangers they face are getting a lot more attention than they otherwise would have done. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Sydney.
Syrian rebel factions are on the offensive days after ISIL captured villages in the north close to the border with Turkey. ISIL's attacks in the north come as the international coalition steps up its airstrikes against the group. But ISIL has called in reinforcements.
This truck was packed with explosives. It was just one of a series of ISIL suicide bomb attacks aimed at rebel positions in Maria. The besieged town is a major Syrian opposition stronghold north of Aleppo.
Mara is under ISIL's siege. They are using suicide bombing attacks to take the town. Most of their attacks targeted civilians. ISIL is also using tanks and heavy weapons, but we are determined to hold the ground.
Many civilians have fled fighting, but thousands remain trapped along the border with Turkey. They cannot get into Turkey because the border remains sealed.
The humanitarian situation is difficult. We have one small field hospital which is now overwhelmed by the number of wounded people. Local authorities are struggling to keep basic services running.
There's also intense fighting not far from Maria. Rebel fighters say an ISIL suicide bomb attack targeted their positions near Kfar Kalbin. The village north of Aleppo was recently captured by ISIL. Despite a rebel push to recapture the village, ISIL fighters still hold ground. Kurdish fighters are in action on the outskirts of Raqqa. They belong to an umbrella organization of Kurdish, Arab and Assyrian fighters called the Syrian Democratic Forces. Backed by US Special Forces, they are massing troops for a final push to recapture Raqqa. But recapturing the self-declared capital of ISIL won't be easy. ISIL has thousands of fighters in both Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, their main strongholds in Syria.
The World Health Organization has rejected demands for this summer's Rio Olympics to be moved or postponed due to the Zika virus. The move by the UN health body comes after 150 leading scientists call on it to reverse its Zika guidance. In an open letter, they said it would be currently unethical for the Games to go ahead under public health grounds.
The World Health Organization has rejected demands for this summer's Rio Olympics to be moved or postponed due to the Zika virus. The move by the UN health body comes after 150 leading scientists called on it to revise its Zika guidance. In an open letter, they said it would be currently unethical for the Games to go ahead under public health grounds. Despite that, the WHO in response said delaying or moving the Olympics would not significantly alter the spread of the virus. The Zika infection in pregnant women has been linked to serious birth defects. Brazil has confirmed more than 1,400 cases since the outbreak began last year. The International Olympic Committee has also said it sees no reason to cancel or move the Brazil Games because of the mosquito-borne disease.
That brings us to the end of your IKtv news updates. You can also watch the recap of our local weather forecast. I am Daniel Vera. Thanks for watching and have a good evening.